Okay. My name is, I'm going to call to order the 7 o'clock hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'll be acting as chairman of the hearing. With me are Christopher Hart and Michael Brown, both members of the hearing. This hearing's been called by the board to review the terms of the special permit that the board issued to the historic New England several years ago, and which permit is in to be extended on August 13th of this year. The variance has I'm sorry, the special permit has a provision in it which provides for automatic extension unless objected to. Unless timely objected to, but it also has a provision that permits the board to review the terms of the condition from time to time. It is that provision that the board has elected to exercise in calling this hearing. I want to be clear about that. What we have is a letter that initiated this matter and called this to the board's attention, dated May 28, 2025, by John Corey, who I know is either in a abutter or lives very close to the property. I see Mr. Corey is here, and I think I've certainly spoken to you, Mr. Corey, about a traffic issue on Canton Avenue, if I remember correctly. And I know the property. We all know the property. So thank you for that. Give you time to certainly explain. I see your counsel is here. Mr. Corey calls several points to the board's attention for consideration. So that's one document we have. We also have a July 1st, 2025 letter from Mrs. Marion McKettrick, attorney in Milton, who's representing Historic New England in connection with this matter. I see Mrs. McKettrick is here, and we'll hear from her. And then lastly, this afternoon, we got a letter from Mr. Hill, who I see here, and we know from prior hearings in the town of Milton. Good to see you, Counselor. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals. So, and thank you for that. I won't. I did read the letter. Thank you, but it just came in this afternoon. Can't say that we studied. I don't know that my colleagues had a chance to study it. So when I ask you to present, if you don't mind giving us a little bit more summary of details on the points that you've made, just owing to the time pressure. So the way I'd like to handle this hearing is ask Mrs. McKettrick on behalf of Historic New England about how the property has been cared for and how it's gone over the time that the board since the board has issued the permit. Because I want to think about this as a little bit of an update. It's been quite a while since we issued that permit. I remember that hearing quite well, and there was a lot of interest in the hearing from the people on the Hill, and a lot of excitement by Historic New England about the opportunity to purchase the historic property. So that was very memorable, but it was also 10 years ago. So I think it would help to give a sense of how it's gone, how Historic New England feels about their stewardship of the property, what's going on, how it's been received, just in general. And then I know you went into that some in your letter, and then maybe a little bit more about the specific issues that have been raised by Mr. Corey. You could maybe respond to that, and then we could hear from Mr. Hill, we could hear from others, and we could conduct the hearing. Does that sound acceptable?
Just whatever you want to do.
Okay. Mr. Hart or Mr. Brown, do you have any comments or questions right now about how we plan to conduct this hearing?
No, Mr. Chair, that sounds fine.
Okay.
Nor do I.
Mrs. McKettrick, welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much. I'm Mary McKettrick, and I am representing Historic New England in its response to these complaints. And also, if you could admit, if they're here, Peter Gittleman, who's the Vice President for Visitor Experience at HNE, and then also, I believe, Carissa Demore, or Damari. She's the Vice President and Chief Policy Director at HNE. So I'm going to provide as much detail as I can in response to Mr. Mullen's request. about what's been happening in the last 10 years in terms of how the property's been managed and what the events have been and so forth. But I do believe that Peter Gittleman would be the best person to provide detail about that. We did discuss this, of course, several times, and then quickly tonight after receiving the letter. So there are some specifics that we want to respond to. Just as a general comment, Historic New England's core mission is a combination of things. It's to preserve and protect historic properties, but specifically to invite the public into those properties to enjoy those properties. So this isn't a museum where, only a few people can go and there's a high admission and, it's not like the Museum of Fine Arts or something like that. So events of various types, which are held at this site, are designed to bring the public in so that they can be there and enjoy the property. And we'll talk about specific types of events that have been held. I'll ask Peter Gittleman to provide more detail about some of those. But it's very important to understand that all the different types of events, and with my letter, I sent you a list of events for the past year, they're designed with that purpose in mind. They're not designed always specifically as historic interpretation events or anything like that, but they are designed to bring the public in so they can be up here at the site and enjoy it. And the rest of the time, from dawn to dusk, the property is open, and any member of the public who wants to can drive up and sit in the parking lot. They can walk around the grounds. They can enjoy the sunset. They have to get out of there by the time the sun goes down. And the property has been managed with that idea in mind. So, there are dawn to dusk signs posted at the property. Nobody can be there after dusk. That's also on the website. But we don't want to the purpose of this, having this property is not, to keep people out most of the time. It's to regulate their use of the property and also to attract people to come here. Sometimes they might be people who haven't ever seen the museum. This is the first chance they'd have to see this house. And I remember when it wasn't a museum, no one was allowed to go up there. You could walk in and roam the grounds, but you were trespassing if you did that. I think it was, pretty unique that this property was preserved for the use of the public. Finally, I do think there's some disagreement, I guess, that Historic New England disagrees with some of the interpretations of the original permit conditions. But I do know that Mr. Mullen sat on that original hearing and probably remembers it very well. So we can talk about that a little bit more later on. I want to just summarize our response to the original complaint, which was filed on May 29th. We did prepare a written response. I'm not going to go into as much detail as is in that response, but some of my answers I think will also be responses to the letter from Attorney Hill. So I'm just going to start right out with the first complaint that we heard about, which was that there's a new floodlight shining onto the neighbor's property. And in the Hill letter, there's a reference to Historic New England should not be allowed to have lighting that shines onto neighbors' property. Historic New England doesn't disagree with that. The floodlights, the two floodlights that were installed 2 years ago were put on the existing light posts in the parking lot. They were not dark sky compliant. They were not screen. They didn't have a shield going towards the neighbor's property. That was not correct. And they have consulted with a lighting consultant and would be very willing to replace those lights with dark sky compliant shielded lighting. And also, if the board feels it's appropriate, that there be an actual condition referencing that requirement that lighting can't shine onto neighboring properties. That's acceptable and reasonable and makes good sense to everybody. So you have specifications for those lights, and we can talk about them some more if you want to, but I won't go into that detail right now. And the second request that the neighbors have made is that they have talking about wanting to put thick new vegetation along the side of the reception center and the parking lot on the side facing their property. So such vegetation was required in the original special permit on the Chestnut Run side, and it was installed. So there's a number of issues with that. One reason that was given for installing that vegetation was that it would block these these lights that shine on their property. We don't believe that that would block the lights, because the lights are actually fairly tall and they would be above the trees. And the better way to control the lighting is to put in new lighting that's properly shielded and is dark sky compliant. Then the other part of the request for that vegetation is that the screening is required to block the neighbor's view of the visitor center,
I'm sorry, may I
the
interrupt?
parking lot, and the dumpster. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry to
Mr.
interrupt.
Hart,
I don't know if it's just on my end, but at least it seems like Ms. McKettrick is breaking up a bit, and I couldn't understand the last maybe 10 seconds of what you said.
Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Have you missed?
It was breaking
Should I
up from
start
our
over?
end too.
Oh, that's very weird. Let's see. I mean, I have good reception. I don't know why
you
that's
could
happening.
start with a discussion. You concluded about the floodlights and the lighting. You were talking about the screening, and then you began to pixelate a little bit.
Okay, so the problem with saying that the screening will block the lights is that it really won't. Light posts are higher than the trees. The solution to that is to put in proper lighting that does not extend all the way down the hill towards the neighbor's property, that has a limited extent. It has to be a specific type of lighting. We can talk some more about that at some point, or we can make a condition that it be that type of lighting. The other reason for the screening is that the neighbors said they don't want to have to look at the visitor center, the parking lot, and and this is just the parking lot itself, because they're asking, I haven't seen a plan, but they were asking for screening right along the edge between the big lawn and the visitor center, and then along the edge along the parking lot. The problem with that request is, first of all, that the lot line is 500 feet away. The neighbor's lot line is really far away. It's up on the top of the hill. Second is, the visitor center is an existing 50-year-old garage that has always been on the property and is part of the site. And it's not ugly or unattractive. It's just a low building. It's one story. The parking lot is a gravel parking lot. Again, it's not particularly noticeable. But from Historic New England standpoint, to put that screening up means that the public, when they come in, they walk around the visitor center, they go through the parking lot, they sit in the parking lot in their cars, which people do. I do it. They can't see the view anymore. And the sweeping view of the grounds and all of the special vegetation, some of which has been preserved from the original Eustis Estate, that's a very important part of this preservation project. And an important part of inviting the public in to enjoy it is that we keep those views available. So we do have a problem with that request. I know that the Historic New England staff have discussed it with the neighbors in the past. You may want to continue to discuss it, but that is their response to that particular request. Then there's a request that special permit condition 1F be referenced, that says that private events with illumination, with, I think, with, sound, that they can only be contracted with members of Historic New England. So that means weddings. That's about weddings. Historic New England has strictly followed that requirement. It also has many fewer weddings than the 12 per year, 2 per month that are specified in the special permit. So I don't know what that issue is exactly. We may be misunderstanding that. And there's probably more about that in another context in the letter from Attorney Hill. Finally, noise and trespassing during events. I'm going to start with trespassing. Historic New England has been aware of this concern from the neighbors. They've erected no trespassing signs near the lot line along that property. They've also, they are now putting a cone in the center of the neighbor's driveway when there's an event, and the recent Juneteenth event is an example of that. So telling visitors not to go up that driveway, that's not part of Historic New England, that they'll be trespassing if they do that. And to the best of my knowledge, that worked very well at the Juneteenth event. The other thing that Historic New England recommended, or at least offered, was they have offered to put a low black chain link fence all along the property line with 1452 Canton Ave, which would keep trespassers and dogs, because dogs apparently are another part of the complaint here, that would keep them out of the property. Now, I'm not sure that the owners of 1459 want that. I don't think that so far they've said they did. But I do think it's important to say that Historic New England has offered to do that, and that is a solution to trespassing. As far as noise is concerned, and when they have a private wedding event where they have amplified noise, they face the speakers away from 1452 Canton Ave and back up towards the parking lot. I'm going to ask Peter Gittleman later on to explain some of the events that have been held over the past number of years and how they're laid out, where people sit, where the performance is done, if it's a performance, and if there's a need for overflow parking, that overflow parking can be where the overflow parking is now. Couple of points I want to make. The original special permit doesn't say that Historic New England can have only the number of specified parking spaces. It says they have to have those as a minimum. In terms of what would be needed if you had a craft fair, for example, or any other type of event at the site, that would vary, and use can be made of the fields basically for overflow parking, and I believe that was the intention, and I hope everybody agrees reading that special permit that that's what the special permit says. Now, to go on to some of the specifics in Attorney Hill's letter, I'm not going to cover all of them, but there's a complaint that kids or people are hanging out in the parking lot late at night. This was a problem. There have been some incidents of that happening. So the police asked that the lights be left on till 11 o'clock in the parking lot. And the police have also added this parking lot and this grounds as part of their regular patrol. So they are now patrolling. And as far as we know, recently there hasn't been any such event or incident, but that is how it would be monitored and handled. And the police are cooperating with that. Even though this is private property, they are helping to make sure that that's not happening. So as far as event management on site, every event that Historic New England holds has on-site management. And a number of events have multiple managers. They never hold events without having on-site management. So I know there was a request, there be a condition, there be on-site management. That already occurs. You can write it into the special permit. It's what Historic New England does. There's never more than one tent at any event. There's one tent platform. It's used for weddings. It might be used on other occasions. There's never been a tent in the parking lot. So the special permit clearly distinguishes a private event with amplified sound from other events, and the limits that are set in this, at least that's how I read the special permit. It sets limits to those events of 12 per year, 2 per month. Those are primarily weddings. And they don't have that many weddings. I mean, last year they had 1, this year they had 3. Those raise money for Historic New England. And the special permit specifically allows events like that. But they're limited. And the reason for the limitation is the neighbors were worried that that type of event could become quite intrusive or noisy or whatever. So the Historic New England has carefully observed the limitations. And finally, well, I already mentioned there are signs on the site and on the website stating that the grounds close at dark. So I'm sure there are other points in Attorney Hill's letter. But at this point, if it pleases the board, I'd like to ask Peter Gittleman and it kind of lines up with what Jeffrey Mullen was saying. Since 2016, there have been a number of different types of events at the Eustis Estate. Can you give us some examples of events and how they are managed?
Sure, and good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Gittleman, the Vice President for the Visitor Experience. Hello, John and Miguel. So the Eustis Estate, just sort of giving you a quick 10-year wrap up with a little brief gap for COVID in the middle of it all. The program that we laid out early on is pretty much what has been evolving and growing ever since. When we started thinking about acquiring the Eustis Estate and opening it up to the public, the goal was, in fact, public engagement. The goal was to engage the public in history, in art, in architecture, and in culture. And of course, not everybody likes to go inside historic house museums for tours. And so the public program that we have been developing over the past decade really does look at what visitors want, what the public wants in terms of engagement and experience. And so that's really what's been driving us. We certainly are not trying to grow this into a giant wedding mill or renting it out for massive concerts. The sorts of events that we do and have been doing all along are ones that are partner programs with both local and regional groups that sort of expand the way people perceive historic sites, which are there for the public. And I'll just give you a couple of examples just so you can understand the sorts of events that we're doing. A typical concert, we do a series of concerts every summer in partnership with a local group. The bands performers are often in the arcade facing down the hill, if you know the Eustis Estate, facing down the hill toward the historic gatehouse. And visitors are on lawn chairs or on blankets, bringing their own picnic lunches. And those typically bring in about 100 people in the evening, mostly locals. We recently had a Juneteenth event, which was considerably larger than those concerts. We had a few hundred people at that event. Lots of people, different performances, people coming and going over the course of 3 hours from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. The performers were in the same location. So again, the sound was going down the hill toward our gatehouse. And the cars were, again, coming and going to experience the delight and celebration. And that was done in conjunction with a local church in Mattapan, as well as Courageous Conversations right here in Milton. The largest event that we run is our arts market, our fine arts and crafts market, which is a program where people are coming and staying for about an hour and then leaving. So the numbers actually appear much larger. It's held in a field that is on the other side of the historic mansion from 1452, much closer to Chestnuts Run. And it usually has about 50 small pop-up tents with fine arts craftspeople selling their wares. And then we, of course, offer visits to the Historic House Museum as well. And one other thing that we've been experimenting with, and we'll be doing a couple times this year, is historic plays, which will travel around the landscape, smallish groups, probably 30 or 40, 50 per group, but outdoor performances. We're doing Shakespeare, as well as different kind of bike-themed play, which will move into 4 or 5 different locations around the property. So we're still in the experimental phase, trying to figure out what sticks, what people care about. What we have learned is that people care about music. And music is one way for people who don't want to go inside the museum to experience the wonder of the Eustis Estate. And we are extraordinarily conscious of our neighbors and trying to be as respectful as we possibly can. Sometimes the parking does expand beyond the traditionally established overflow parking. But again, as Marion mentioned, our plan here was never to be limited to such a small number of people on site. It had to flow out onto the land beyond when we had larger events. We have about 100 parking spots that are always in use. And for these larger events, the goal is to be able to expand. And we always have parking attendants. This for the Juneteenth event, I was the parking czar. I was out there with 2 other people, and we were on walkie-talkie managing the cars perfectly. And there was never a sense that things were getting out of control.
Thank you, Mr. Gittleman. Marion, anybody else from the historic New England? you'd like to
I would just ask Carissa Demore. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, Carissa. I'm sorry.
You are, Mary.
Carissa Demore is here. I just want to ask her if she has anything she'd like to add.
Only my thanks to the board for your time and your thoughtful consideration, both with the initial special permit and tonight. It has been really an honor and a privilege for us at Historic New England to be able to care for and steward the Eustis Estate. It is a magical property. It is clearly historically significant and embraced by the Milton community, and we really love being a part of the community and being able to expand the ways that people find and take inspiration from the property. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me ask, before we ask Mr. Hill or Mr. Corey if they want to speak, let me ask if the members of the board have anything that they'd like to ask of the Historic New England representatives.
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Nor do I, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Chair Mullen and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be back. It's been a while.
We
My
missed
name,
you.
for the record, is Dan Hill. I'm a land use attorney based out of Boston, and I represent John and Miguel, who are here, as you can see. They are the direct abutters to the Eustace Estate at 1452 Canton Ave. And in a minute, Miguel is going to show you some slides that he's prepared, which provide some sort of background and a lay of the land, so to speak, in terms of where the Eustace Estate is in relation to my client's property and where these various components are that we've been hearing about from Marion and our team. I do want to basically start with a brief overview of where we stand, the history of the permit, and what the concerns are, and then we'll get to what the ask is. And after I provide that background, Miguel does have some slides that he'd like to present on the screen, again showing the visuals of these areas that we're speaking of, and then I'll come back and speak to the proposed conditions that we've drafted that we did send to you later this after or earlier today in written form. I do want to just start by saying that I don't think any of us has any disagreement over the benefit that Historic New England brings to the town of Milton through its stewardship of this property. Certainly, we're all very grateful that Historic New England was able to acquire the property and save 80 acres from development to preserve the historic estate and to provide a resource for the town of Milton and its residents. Nor is there any dispute or disagreement over the programming that Historic New England has engaged in, wants to engage in. Peter is correct. We are definitely concerned about this proliferating into something that's goes beyond the mission of Historic New England. We are definitely concerned that this could be an event venue, but we're very happy to hear that that's not their intent. But that, as this board knows, that's something that we think should be incorporated into conditions, and that there should be some framework to make sure that the events that are happening on the site are well managed and respectful of the neighborhood, while at the same time serving the purpose of Historic New England. So again, the main message that we want to bring tonight is not that we have a problem with the events per se, it's that we have a problem with the way they're managed. And there are some things that we think can be done to improve the management of these events, so they have less negative impacts on neighbors and on the town of Milton in general. So just going back to 2015, I agree with Marion's recitation of the facts. There was a special permit issued. The special permit did limit non-museum related events to 12 per year, 2 per month. Curiously, the conditions in the decision also said that that it basically restricted people attending the events to members of Historic New England. And I'm not sure that the board, probably intended that to mean that no one could attend an event that's not a member, but that's kind of how it's written. I'm not sure the board also intended that there would be 20 or 30 events, large scale events, 50 or more people on this site. I'm not sure the board intended that there would be unlimited cars coming either. So again, I think just to address something that Marion just mentioned, or Peter mentioned, I think that yes, there are parking designated parking areas on the site for roughly 100 cars. It was, I think, my intention when I was here in 2015, and I think others, that was where the parking was going to be. I don't think there was an understanding or an intent that that was a minimum, that there would be potentially 1,000 cars parked on the site. So I think the benefit of tonight's hearing is that hopefully we can all kind of come together and come up with a framework of conditions, including parking, where tents are going to be located, where music's going to be located, and so forth, and screening, that hopefully we can all agree on and that we can go forward with, so that we have some certainty and protection for the neighbors, and some certainty for historic New England as well. So with that being said, I think it makes sense now for Miguel.
Let me just, if you don't mind, Mr. Hill, I want to make a couple of comments about the board's intention when it issued the permit. The parking is clearly, the issue at the hearing was clearly that there wasn't enough parking. And it was really, the board specifically made a finding that the parking that was provided was adequate for the uses that were proposed. There's nothing in the permit, nor is anything that I recall about that hearing about limiting the parking. Now, it's not to say that the parking shouldn't be limited, but that wasn't the issue at the hearing. The other thing is, the permit doesn't limit the number of events. It limits the number of amplified events with sound that's amplified, because if you remember, the then abutters were very concerned about sound, and most of the hearing was about sound, as I recall. I mean, other than the opportunity that was provided by Historic New England being able to secure title to the property, which I think was a lot of what the neighbors were talking about, and to your point about protecting the 80 acres, I think it was largely about sound, and we had a lot of conversations about those wedding types of events, but not about museum programming, not that I recall. So I just wanted to put a marker on that. They really, I just wanted to note that I disagreed with your characterization. That's all.
Okay.
Now, go ahead, continue. You wanted Mr. Rosales to make a presentation?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd like to share my screen.
Please.
Let's see, let me try. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
That's good. Oh. Okay, so as Dan mentioned, I'm Miguel Rosales, and with me John David Corey. We are the owners of 1452 Canton Avenue. We bought the property about 7 years ago, and we spent 3 years restoring it. And we continue to restore it now. There's still things that we want to do, and we continue to improve the property. It's not clicking. Let's see. Some issue. Okay, here. Yeah, so I think we want to discuss 2 items. One is landscape buffers, and the other one is the special events. I think those are the 2 main concerns that we have in terms of how Historic New England has been operating the museum since it was installed 10 years ago. This is a plan that shows the property and then different locations of the different elements in the property.
Can you guys see the cursor if we move it like that or
Yes.
no? Okay.
Yes.
So the cursor.
So you can see here we have 1452 Canton Avenue. We have a long area where we share the property with Historic New England. And there is many places where we can see the parking lot, the visitor center, and all of the overflow parking. So, that's one of the main concerns that we have, that we're able to see these elements. And you have to remember that when Eustis Estates was built 150 years ago, there was nothing like that existed here. There was no welcome center, there was no parking lot, there was no overflow parking. So all of these elements are really not part of the historic landscape of the area. They were added because, Historic New England wanted to make it into a museum. When the special permit was approved in 2015, a lot of landscaping was added, but all the landscaping was added towards, the neighbors on the other side, and there was no landscaping added, towards side. And I think what happened is that at that time, historian New England knew and they owned the property, so they were not interested in putting any landscaping there. I have to say that doing a low hedge of 3 to 4 feet along the parking lot is not going to impede the view. I don't understand that comment that you're not going to be able to, to block the view, because nobody really wants to see cars or a dumpster or a very unattractive visitor center, which, is really not compatible with the main house. I mean, the visitor center was built in 1950s and doesn't have to have anything with the architecture of the main house. So you can see here highlighting in yellow the buffer that was installed for the neighbors on the other side. And you see the dumpster, and they cannot see it. We see the dumpster, and we would like to see if there's a possibility to add some landscaping, on that side of the property, so we can mitigate, this issue. Of course, this, buffer has grown over time, so it's very effective right now. If you are on the other side of the buffer, you don't see the dumpster, you don't see the parking lot. So it has been very effective for the neighbors. However, on our side, we are completely exposed. And I know that the property, there's a distance between our property and the area where this is located, but we can clearly see it. Because one of the issues is that most of the trees that are evergreen and very thick are on the side of the user's estate house. On the north, there's only deciduous trees, and in the winter, it's completely open. So you're able to see, all of the property. That's not happening in the area where you have the Eustace Museum, because I think, maybe 50, 70 years ago, they planted a lot of evergreens, and it's a very good buffer, which we don't have on our side. So even if we are farther away, we can still see, the dumpster, the parking lot, the visitor center.
Yeah, nice buffer.
Yeah, so, I mean, we would be happy with something similar to this, but even if it's lower, we'd still be happy. We would like to have some mitigation of the parking lot, of the dumpster and the visitor center.
Mhm.
I think that's a reasonable request. I don't think it's going to block any of the views. The minute that you step out of the buffer, you're going to see the whole view. So it's, to me, it's disingenuous to say that this is a reason not to include the buffer on that side. So as you see here, the dark green is the buffer that was installed in 2015, and we would like to install something similar, on the other side. We're aware that you have to have the overflow parking, so we don't want to block the overflow parking. You should still be able to use it if you want to use it. But we would prefer to have some landscaping here, some landscaping on this area, and also because for these big events that they are having right now, there is a lot of cars. We would like to have a proposed landscape buffer on this location too. We don't think that these are unreasonable requests. I think that this is going to increase, their visibility in terms of making it most attractive, location for the museum. Again, the parking lot is not attractive. The dumpster is not attractive. And when you have many, many cars here, which I'm going to show a video, it becomes really, a huge parking lot outdoors. Adding landscaping, I don't think it's going to change any of the views. It's actually going to enhance them. One of the reasons that we requested this is because we have actually added landscaping on our side. But the problem is that the focus of the problem, is very easy to manage if you put the landscaping next to it. If we have to landscape the entire area, I mean, it's an enormous effort and very, very complicated, when it could be just mitigated by putting some landscaping, near the parking lot. So these are some of the, the areas that we have concern, looking at the cars, looking at the dumpster. The visitor center, again, is not a historic building. It was built in the 1950s, I believe. They open all these windows, so it doesn't really look, like anything related to the house. So we would like to have some mitigation on that side. This is some of the views. You can see here the lights. These lights are for the overflow parking, and they were shining into our property. We don't understand why you had to have overflow lighting at night when, they had to have a generator come anyway for let's say for a wedding. So they could just have the lighting installed at that time. I don't think there is a need to have these lights on, until 11 p.m. It seems, and I know that they're proposing different type of light. You're still going to see it, given that type of light that they're proposing. So I don't think it's appropriate to have, this overflow lighting shooting into our property. This is the visitor center. In front of the visitor center, there's not a single plant. It's completely barren. So we don't understand that either. It would be very nice to have at least some landscaping here to improve, improve the area. Again, nothing attractive about the dumpster, that could be mitigated, with some landscaping. This is what happens when you have these big events. You have cars everywhere, way beyond the property that was allocated, to put the parking when we saw the special permit in 2015. It's not attractive. It's very complicated for us. These events have a lot of sound. Now we have, I think, 6 or 7 yearly events where there is amplified sound. So, we see this as intensification of use. It's definitely happening. I mean, from 2016 to now, the intensification of use of data has increased. And there is more events, there is more concerts, there is more things happening outdoors, which I understand that that's something that, Historianland would like to do, but I think we have to find a clean, like a good balance between being in a residential area and doing a museum that has all these outdoor amplified music events, outdoors with many, many people. These are the lights. I'm just going to show some views from our property. This is the winter view, where you can clearly see everything. These are other views when you see, with all the cars that are being added when you have these special events. This is from the other side of the property. And I would like to just show you something about, a video that shows the 2 elements. This is one of the problems that we wanted to discuss. We understood that the parking lot and the overflow parking was going to be in a certain area, but when they have a special events, they extend way beyond, and the cars can actually come very, very close to our property. And I don't know if that's really what they intend, that you will have so many cars, in the museum space. So that's a concern to us. We thought that, the special permit was indicating that you will have a parking lot and then an overflow parking space, not the entire site can have cars. I mean, it's like, you want to allow 2,000 cars to come into the property. I mean, it seems, not the best use of the land, and also it's having a lot of impact on the property of Historic New England. So, we're very concerned about that. And this is just to show you, this was a recent event. All of these areas are way beyond the area where it was supposed to be located for the parking. So, that's a big concern of us, how many cars and how many events, the amplified music, the intensification of use. And are these summer concerts really critical to Historic New England? Again, we have to balance being in a residential area and having a museum. I think that, that's something that needs to be, looked into. Can we go to the next one? Okay. And that's, an example of the wedding. In this one, actually, it was very, very loud. We had called the police. Another issue that we had is that there was nobody from Historic New England at this event. So there was no manager at night there because nobody sleeps in the property. So this was, close to 10, 11 a.m. And we think that that's a problem, that there should be somebody there from the beginning of the event to the completion. Just going to show it again. And is this reasonable noise? We don't think so. So, we're a little bit confused with these 2 items here. Does this mean that you can have 12 weddings in a year? Is that what this means?
Yeah.
Does it mean that you can have this amplified music 12 times in a year. So, we're concerned about that. I think that it's too much because they're also having all these other amplified music events. They're having summer concerts, they're having a jazz festival, they are having, like this Unity event where it was also with music. So is that what the intention? I mean, we would like to see if something could be added, so we don't have to deal with, all of these amplified event with music. So, in summary, this is some of our concerns. Additional parking in our thought was not permitted to have way beyond the parking lot and way beyond the overflow parking area. The noise and the glaring lights. We also have a lot of trespassing vehicles and visitors, from the museum. So having many, many more events is not going to help us. Almost every single day we have a car coming out our driveway because they think they're going to the Justice Estate, not to our house. When you have an event, you have all these Ubers coming back and forth. You have people trespassing.
Okay.
So, it's a problem for us. And I know that Historian has tried to, improve some issues, by putting these small signs. I think that has helped in some manner. But the amount of space and the distance that we have is substantial. So it's very hard to control, what you can do between the two properties because it's very, very long. We also consider having these free regional events without museum membership. I don't know if that should be the intention of all these events, having so many people come to the property. And the safety at night, there is no caretaker living at the place. So when there is an issue, we have to be the police. We have to be the one that call the police because there is nobody at night that, will respond for Historic New England because nobody's sleeping there. So I'd like to turn it on to Suzanne here.
Yeah, I'm just going to say a few things if you don't mind, Chair Mullen.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to say just to say a few things. So, John David Corey, I didn't really introduce myself before, but just so the boards know, I grew up in Milton. I went to Pierce, went to Milton Academy, and actually I grew up on the other side of Eustis. And I know the estate. I knew the Jeffries family. I would just like to say that Historic New England has done a yeoman's job in preserving all that land. I mean, I grew up there. I knew what a 5 acre, I knew the Jeffries land. I would hike through the woods with the son. And so it just, I think that, and then I, through the urging of Carl Nold, who was the president of Historic New England, bought 1452. I think we did an exceptional job on the renovation, and I hope it's a role model for the town. I'm very proud of the project. But I would just say, and I love Historic New England. We've been benefactors, and I just want to have the museum next door as a true asset that it can be. And I think that having, some extra security measures, maybe some control of the parking, some buffers added, not asking for craziness, and better management, I think could go a long way for us as the butters and also for everybody else in the area. So thank you for the time, and I think Dan Hill's going to say a few things.
Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you. So the slide that's on your screen contains the proposed changes that we would make to the existing conditions on the special permit. Some of these look familiar, some are a little bit different. But I'm not going to repeat what John and Miguel just said. The bottom line is we feel that there should be some tweaking to the parameters for the events that occur on the site. So the first tweak we would suggest is that the number of events, these large scale events, be limited to 12, 9 of which would be any special event that's related to the museum or not related to the museum. 3 of which could be the private events such as weddings, which sounds like is the right number for Historic New England. I think one of the problems that we see with the language that's in the existing special permit is that it's really geared towards regulating non-museum related events, but in fact, there really isn't much distinction between museum related and non-museum related when it comes to the impacts. And sometimes it's really hard to distinguish. Are these concerts, the summer music series that occurs on the site, is that related to the museum? I mean, arguably it's not, because the people who are performing there have no relationship to the museum at all. It's just that the museum is hosting it. But on the other hand, of course, they'd argue that, well, this brings people to the site, so that's good for our overall mission. Again, no one is concerned about the program. The issue isn't about the events. The issue is just these events need to just need to have some greater control and parameters to avoid impacts. So our suggestion is 9 special events with 3 weddings per year. So that's conditions 1 and 2, or 2 and 3 actually. And then condition 4 just repeats, I think, what we had in the original permit, that the noise be limited so that it doesn't violate the state noise standards.
The permit, okay, go ahead.
And then the next condition is that there be staff on site during any event. I heard Marion say that there's always somebody there, but I think our experience has been that there sometimes isn't. So it's great that we're hearing that there's plans to have people directing traffic and so forth. I think that just should be incorporated into the permit. Putting in writing the time periods that I think everybody's already agreed to, that the events should occur between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. and not later. And then probably one of the more critical pieces of this is limiting the size of these events. So maybe there's a dispute about what should happen on this property. Our feeling is that these events should be limited in size and scale, that the existing parking of roughly 100 spaces, that should guide how many people are coming to these events and how big these events really are. If we don't have a parameter, then there's no limit. So we think that should be built into the conditions. Number 8 is the lighting, which I think we've already talked about. And number 9 is the screening. And we have a plan. If we haven't already, we'll email you the plan that was on the screen showing where we think the appropriate screening would be. They don't have to be tall arborvitaes. They could be a hedgerow that's 3 feet tall, that doesn't block views. So there's definitely flexibility here. It's not like we're trying to break down views. We'd love to have a dialogue and discussion with the board about what's appropriate for any additional screening around the parking. And then finally, a new condition that addresses the security. There is no gate currently that prevents anybody from coming onto the property at night. And as Miguel said, there's no one there at night. So it's all well and good to say the Milton police will stop by every now and then, but it seems to me a better deterrent would just simply be to put a gate at the driveway that would deter people from coming into the site at night. And perhaps Historic New England can install some trail cameras and there's a lot of ideas that we can talk about to improve the security and to ensure that folks aren't coming onto the property when they shouldn't be coming on. So I think that concludes our presentation. Appreciate the board's time tonight to consider these ideas, and happy to have a further discussion.
I'd like to ask that this presentation be submitted to the board for the record, and also a copy of it be distributed to Historic New England.
Of course.
Thank you. Could you take the presentation down, please? Let me ask if any of the members of the board have any questions for Mr. Corey, Mr. Rosales, or Mr. Hill.
I have a couple of questions, just general questions for
Sure.
Mr. Hill. So, I mean, I understand your client's concerns, certainly. I just want to be sure I understand what kind of the request is here. So, am I correct in saying that the concern is that the use of the property has changed since 2015? First part, and then second part is there anything specific that you're citing as evidence that the terms of the permit are not being complied with?
Well, first, I don't think anything was happening in 2015. So of course, it's different. I think over the last 10 years, the use has evolved, let's say, and I think that the use has intensified. I think there's been more events. They've been bigger. I don't know if noise is per se the problem. I think the bigger problem is just the proliferation of the events and what doesn't seem to be a master plan. And I think that's what we're looking for, is sort of a master plan, a site plan that this board would approve, saying, yeah, this is where the parking's going to be, and it can't be everywhere. This is where the tents can be, but they can't be everywhere and anywhere. So that's I think the genesis of why we're asking for these conditions, is just that we've seen in particularly the last 5 years, a proliferation of these events, and what doesn't seem to be sort of any kind of rhyme or reason as to where things are. One of the ideas actually we had, which I don't think we mentioned, is that there could be a pre-registration process for these events. In fact, I think the Historic New England does do that for some events, where they'll have people sign up if they want to come. But a lot of events, they don't do that. So when they do that, that's a great tool so they can control how many cars come onto the property. So with respect to violations, I don't know if we're saying that there were any violations per se of the permit. I think we just want to improve the permit. I think there was some ambiguities in the permit, maybe some unintended consequences. And so I think what we're asking for is just to improve these conditions so that they, I think, reflect what the intent was back then, but we could all disagree what the intent was.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, I want to provide Historic New England. Let me make one comment. Let me just talk about the intent. When Historic New England came to the town of Milton and the Milton Board of Appeals for this special permit, the concern was to design a museum that would be successful. The reason for the non-museum related events and the amplified noise was that, as we understood it, was that was going to earn revenue to make the place successful. What I'm hearing is you've succeeded and the museum has been quite successful. And I think Mr. Corey and Mr. Rosales have said it. They've done well. And this is really a 10-year checkup on the permit is the best thing I would say. And that it's the reason why the board agreed to hear this matter. Mr. Hill, you should know that your clients did not make a timely objection to the permit. They submitted after the window. You allege in your letter that you can make an objection to the permit before it automatically renews. I agree, but it had to have been done by May 13, and that wasn't done. So the board is doing this as a 10-year checkup, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that. I haven't heard anything that's out of bounds about what you would hear in a 10-year checkup, but I read your letter and I wanted to get that on the record. Do people disagree with those facts? Okay, so let me all right. I also think these are important matters that are going to take some time. So I don't know that we can get through them all tonight, but I'd like to give Historic New England an opportunity to respond to some of this if they want. And then I'd like to hear from the public if they're here. But I just want to get a couple of those out on the table preliminarily. Mrs. McKettrick.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a couple of, I guess I'd like to ask some questions. Having seen, the suggestions for requested landscaping, I understand now that the neighbors are saying maybe they're looking for landscaping that's maybe 3 to 4 feet high along the edge of the visitor center and the parking lot. Still, I understand that's what you said you might find acceptable. You also showed landscaping down at the bottom of the hill and then said that could also be 3 to 4 feet high. And I honestly don't understand how that will improve things, particularly unless what you're really talking about, which is what we talked about in our letter, which is that you can add understory, what's called understory vegetation. You're allowed to add it on your side. If you're asking Historic New England to add additional understory vegetation where there's a direct line of sight going up towards that area, I mean, maybe that would help, but it seems to me you would just be looking over it because, you know, this hill is really high. So I'm not, you know, I understand that that's what you're proposing, but I guess perhaps you could think about that. And I know one of you is an architect. I'm not sure which one of you, but I'm sure that you can provide Miguel as, you know, you can explain that. The other comment I have about the landscaping is in one point you showed a drawing and you showed landscaping, perhaps this 3 to 4 foot, all the way around the parking lot. And you need to understand, I mean, it's impossible to have overflow parking out of that parking lot if you put landscaping all around it. I mean, there has to be a way to get to the overflow parking. So that needs to be looked at again. And I'm not sure how landscaping on the right side really affects your view in any case, but those are just some specific questions I had about your comments about landscaping. Then just listening to what you're saying in terms of the entrance, you're still having problems, you say, you know, just ordinarily. It can be confusing, those two driveways. I'm wondering if there shouldn't be better and bigger signage at the entrance, very clearly delineating private property and Historic New England. There's a small sign, I think. So I'd like you to think about that as an option, and maybe you have a suggestion on that. As far as there being no management there is management there for events. And as I said, there are multiple managers for some of these events that are larger. If you look at the list of events that we provided as an example, this is for the last 2025 event schedule. There are all types of events. I mean, there are some concerts, but Peter Gittleman already explained those concerts are not 1,000 or 2,000 person concerts. They tend to have, you know, 100, maybe 150 people at most, and that's not 150 cars. I don't think that they're a problem. I mean, the concert locations are either on the porch or they're on the lawn facing downhill, you know, sort of in the direction of the building at the entrance. Again, that would tend to mean that the sound would go in that direction. And they're all variety of concerts, but a number of them seem to be jazz. I guess that's what people like. Not, you know, well, I don't know anything about modern, you know, contemporary music, so I'm not going to give an example. But these aren't, well, I guess I'd say in the old days, we'd say these aren't rock concerts, you know, but there could be all types of music, particularly at a place like at an event like Juneteenth. So, and I know there were a number of music events there. So, and secondly, the events are of many different types. So when there's a craft event, and I've attended them up there, people come throughout the day. They visit the little booths. They're not crowded at all. And if you added up everybody who comes in the course of a day, you get a number that looks like an awful lot, but that's not who's there at any given time. So there are significant problems with saying, well, we should just limit the number of visitors that you can have. And these are just my comments, by the way. I want to give an opportunity to Historic New England to tell me what they, you know, inform us better. But
Let me just clarify something, Marion, too, before everybody gets nervous. I'm going to ask for this hearing to be continued. All right, this is way too important. We're not going to rewrite this permit tonight.
Sure.
I was not expecting the kind of detail that we have, nor was I expecting specific provisions on the permit. We spent months on that permit, and this facility is way too important for everybody to negotiate on a Zoom hearing 2 days before July 4th. Especially when we just got this letter this afternoon. Thoughtful letter, thank you, but it's detailed. And this is an historic property, right? So I want to hear from people, but I also want people to relax and I want people to overreact. I'm going to recommend as the chair that we continue this and that Historic New England have an opportunity to thoughtfully review what's been thoughtfully presented and to respond in some appropriate way that I know they will do that is also thoughtful with respect to the significance of the property for them, for the town, and frankly, for New England. So I didn't want somebody rushing to have to respond to whether it's 4 feet or 6 feet or 80
Yeah.
feet wide or 30 feet wide. That's all. So, but go ahead, please proceed.
Thank you. Just I had some other thoughts, and I think you may have referenced one of them, but in these situations, you know, again, there was a problem with some congregating in the upper parking lot. That seems to happen all over Milton. And it's been addressed by
We have
having
heard that,
this.
yes. We've
This
heard about
becomes a regular part of the police patrol. This isn't occasional, but there could be security cameras in that parking lot, and that could be discussed. In other words, if there are security cameras, who looks at them? You know, how are they monitored? That's usually the solution to that type of problem. And it's remarkably effective sometimes. Unfortunately, in Milton, you know, when groups go one place, then when the cameras appear, they go somewhere else. It just keeps moving around. Very frustrating. We certainly don't want it up there at Historic New England, and nobody should be up there at night. We'll respond to your request about the gate. If there's a good reason why that's not a good idea, you know, we'll respond to that. I took a lot of notes, but it's hard for me to keep track of, as you say, Chairman Mullen, it's pretty hard to put all this together tonight.
100% understood. I think everybody would understand.
Yeah.
But please, if the Historic New England representatives have something they want to say, I mean, I think the board would appreciate hearing from them, but you don't have to say anything. I don't want to put pressure on people.
So that's it for me. If they want to speak, that's great.
Well, I think I very much appreciate the opportunity to put some real thought into this and to put together the information that would really help the board to understand why we might respond in certain ways to components of this request. And there are just so many granular elements of what was discussed tonight. I think we really need to take a pretty close look at it. I could bat around a few things right now, but I think it would be a better use of everyone's time for us to get organized about this and respond at the next meeting.
Fair enough. Mr. Hill, do you have an objection to that proceeding that way?
No, not at all. I think that makes a lot of sense.
okay.
Come back with better ideas, and maybe we can talk in the meantime.
And I don't mean to stifle conversation. I mean, I still want Mr. Corey. I see you want to be recognized.
I don't want to cut you off. Did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna hear from other people, but go ahead. We'll finish this.
No, I think that's when you said that, I immediately, not that I was gonna say calm down, but I very much appreciate the fact that we can have time to work with Marion and Historic New England. And, I think that honestly, if you boil down all the requests, come down to some security issues, some landscaping issues, some noise issues, some lighting issues. Like, I love the museum, so I think that we can work it out. But I think sometimes it takes, as you know, it may be the public process to sort of get everybody to the table.
Yeah, that's fair. Marion, is your rebuttal, are you prepared to move on?
I'm prepared to move on. I would like to hear from the public if they're here. I'm sure you're going to invite them.
Okay, all right. Let me ask Bill if unless there's comments from my fellow board members. Okay.
I just have a very quick question.
Mr. Hart.
Very, very quick question. Miguel, during your presentation of the slides, you mentioned the sound. I couldn't hear anything in the volume. We're going to have a copy of that with the audio. Okay.
Yes. Yes, in the PowerPoint.
We'll send it as a link.
Thank you.
Bill and Kathy Heath still live up there?
Pardon me?
Have they commented on the sound?
That
was their issue, as I recall. Yeah. Let me ask if there's anybody from the general public who'd like to be heard on this matter.
No one has raised their hand.
Are there people that are from the general public that are listening in, Bill?
There appear to be a couple.
Okay.
Yeah, but,
okay,
no one
that's fine. That's fine.
Comment.
Let me ask if there's any comments or any other testimony that somebody, either the board would like to impart, or questions you'd like to ask, or additional information that we should hear right now? Okay, hearing none. This is what I'd like to suggest. I'd like to propose that we reconvene this hearing sometime in July. And I'd like to ask the neighbors and Historic New England, I'd like to invite them to speak to each other, to Mr. Hill's point, walk the site. I'd like to request that Historic New England take a look at Mr. Hill's letter and the presentation that we just heard, and if you wish, to offer the board additional information. That's voluntary. I'm not requiring that. I think it would be helpful.
Mhm.
But and then I'd like to ask Bill if we can identify a time today, if we can reschedule this or continue this hearing for a time where we can more thoughtfully think about potentially modifying the conditions of the special permit without any commitment to do so in any way. And you know, knowing the amount of work that's gone into this entire project, respectfully, which is on my mind. And you know, I want to take some time to take a look at that PowerPoint, and in particular the letter and the conditions. By the way, were the conditions that we saw on the screen the same conditions that were in the letter? Okay, thank you.
Yes, same.
All right, that helps. Bill, is there a proposed time that we could reconvene?
The only blocked out times I have for other hearings, CBA business, are the 28th and the 30th. And then I believe the 15th, I have an earlier hearing, but I could do a 7. So,
How about the 23rd of July?
I'm available.
Sadly, Mr. Hart's available. Oh, no vacation for you?
Oh, I didn't say that.
Oh, that goes to the question of whether or not we're gonna ever go back to town hall. It's up to the chair. I'm just the acting chair.
The 23rd works for me.
Does that work for Historic New England representatives? Does it work for Mr. Corey, Mr. Rosales?
Yes.
We can make it work. Would it be the same board, or is it just who's available that night?
We're locked in. You
We're
gotta-
locked in.
Just
Good.
stuck with us.
I don't want to do it again.
No, it's fine.
No.
I mean, I think others would appreciate the opportunity to sit and to hear this. It's a privilege. But you've got us. Unless there's an objection, I'd like to, the motion I make is to continue this hearing until 7 o'clock on Wednesday, July 23rd, at which time we'll hear additional testimony and deliberate whether or not it's appropriate to modify the conditions that are in the 2015 special permit. In the meantime, it's the board's expectation that Historic New England will consider the testimony tonight and the materials that you've seen. You know, I welcome additional testimony from others at the continued hearing at that time, and we will discuss the application in more detail. I mean, the matter in more detail at that time. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Okay, so moved. This board, I'll call this meeting to an end, this portion of the meeting to an end, and we'll continue at 7 o'clock on July 23rd. Wish you all a happy 4th of July.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.